In my conversation with President Netanyahu, I commended him for the decision to bring the current hostilities to a close within less than 11 days. I also emphasized what I've said throughout this conflict. The United States fully supports Israel's right to defend itself against indiscriminate rocket attacks from Hamas and other Gaza-based terrorist groups that have taken the lives of innocent civilians in Israel. The Prime Minister also shared with me his appreciation for the Iron Dome system, which our nations developed together and which has saved lives of countless Israeli citizens, both Arab and Jew. I assured him of my full support to replenish Israel's Iron Dome system to ensure its defenses and security in the future. Over the last 11 days, I spoke with the Prime Minister 6 times. I've also spoken with President Abbas of the Palestinian Authority more than once, and part of our intense diplomatic engagement. And I want to also thank the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, our National Security Advisor, and everyone on our team for their incredible efforts to bring this outcome that we're about to see. You know, we've held intensive high-level discussions, hour by hour, literally. Egypt, the Palestinian Authority, and other Middle Eastern countries, with the aim of avoiding the sort of prolonged conflict we've seen in previous years when the hostilities have broken out. I extend my sincere gratitude to President al-Sisi and the senior Egyptian officials who played such a critical role in this diplomacy. One of the reasons why we're able to get the ceasefire in 11 days, they didn't do what other people have done. I don't talk about what I tell people in private. I don't talk about what we negotiate in private. What I can assure you, though, is that the last time it took 56 days and then 6 months to get a ceasefire. I'm praying this ceasefire will hold. I take Bibi Netanyahu when he gives me his word. I take him at his word. He's never broken his word to me. And but what I've made clear is that it's essential. It's essential that the Palestinians on the West Bank be secured, that Abbas be recognized as the leader of the Palestinian people, which he is. Hamas is a terrorist organization. We recognize that. But that doesn't mean we should not be in Gaza, rebuilding Gaza for all those innocent people who, in fact, have been hurt and have been collateral damage, including loss of homes and a whole range of other things, as well as insisting that Israeli citizens, whether they be Arab or Jew, are treated equally as Israeli citizens. And that's what was going on in Jerusalem. And so that has to come to an end. And the Prime Minister knows my views, but the commitment that was given was immediately kept. From the very beginning, I told him what our objective was, that there needed to be a ceasefire, and he, in fact, kept his commitment in the time frame in which he said he would do it.
Yep. So I am Ben Burgess. This is Give Them an Argument, joined as always by our producer Forrest. This is not quite a full real episode tonight since we are both traveling. Can't really be sitting in front of computers for 3 hours like normals. This will be like 40 minutes, an hour, somewhere in between maybe.
Let's see if we can pull it off.
Yeah, just do. Wanted to update on story that we were just watching Sleepy Joe talk about, and a few other things that we've been covering, and take some questions, over the course of however long we're streaming right now. But first, even though I'm doing, even though next year, as we've discussed, I'm going down to just like teaching class as an adjunct and doing full-time political stuff, but I'm still going to put my professor hat on and give Forrest a pop quiz. So we just heard President Biden use the phrase "right to defend itself." Which are the groups about which Biden will ever say in talking about this conflict that they have a right to defend themselves? A, Israel, B, Israel, C, Israel, or D, Israel?
Yeah, I mean all of the above, I guess, if they're all Israel. But no, I mean it's interesting that I was gonna cut this, and then I mean we're doing our short episode. I might try to cut this together for next week's episode, or maybe even for Wednesday. But there's a clip I saw of Biden saying Israel's right to defend itself. There's a clip of Netanyahu where he says, "Thank you to President Biden for defending our right to defend ourselves." And then Blinken today on his way to Israel said, "Israel has the right to defend itself." So I wanted to cut those all together and see how many different.
Yeah, maybe we can do that for next Monday. But yeah, no, I mean, it is remarkable that it's just like they constantly repeat this mantra about how Israel has a right to defend itself. And you will never, ever hear coming out of any of these people's mouths, not just, Netanyahu, obviously, but Blinken, Biden, any of them. You will never hear the word Palestinians in a sentence with right to defend themselves. So if there's tit for tat violence, right, it's only ever Israel defending itself. Apparently, Palestinians defending themselves either isn't a conceptual possibility or has just never come up in their minds.
I mean, that's terrorism, right? Palestinians defending themselves when someone that we're not friends with defends themselves, that's terrorism. When someone we are friends with defends themselves, that's the right to defend themselves.
Yeah, exactly. Which is ass backwards in terms of international law because Israel's an occupying power. But yep, that is the way that they do it. I unfortunately, I mean, obviously it's good that there's a ceasefire, although we should be clear about what that does and doesn't mean in practice.
Yeah. Well, Al Jazeera and Electronic Intifada both had a story that I was reading earlier about how, right as they announced the ceasefire, one of the mosques in Palestine that the whole conflict actually started in when the Israeli police invaded the mosque and started, tear gassing people. They ran right back in and started tear gassing people again within hours of the ceasefire being announced. So, I mean, those are, so it literally just means they're going to stop, doing air raids on parts of Gaza. Like, it doesn't mean the violence stops, and it doesn't mean the Israeli police stop what they're doing, and it doesn't mean individual acts of violence won't take place. It just means that the Israeli state will stop the air raids.
Yeah, and by the way, the fact there are air raids in Gaza at all goes back to the point that I was making last week, and in the Jacobin article I was talking about last week, about one of many reasons why I'm so leery about the idea of a so-called two-state solution. I think for a variety of reasons it wouldn't happen anyway, probably. But if it did, I think look at what's happened in Gaza since the Israeli so-called withdrawal from there. That it's completely dependent on Israel, decide what comes in and out. There are bombing raids there, when Israel decides to defend itself. And I don't see any reason to think that the situation on the West Bank would be significantly different in a two-state future.
Yeah, I don't really understand what the difference would really be. I mean, even with a two-state solution, the PLO or what's left of it right now really is under the control of Israel, and they're seen as the leaders of Palestine. So I don't really see how that would change. I don't see how Israel would stop exerting force over who gets to be in charge. I don't see how they would stop blockading things from getting in. I mean, even if it's not like the de jure version of that, and it's just like kind of a de facto blockade. So I don't see how any of that would really change with Palestine being recognized as a as a state.
Yeah, right. I mean, even look at what's happened with Lebanon, since Israel withdrew from there. I mean, I think if you have a vastly powerful, military force, and it's not like conflict would just, the conflict would just completely go away in this scenario. I mean, there's always time there's some sort of weird, unsatisfying partition deal. There are always going to be factions that don't accept the deal, and and continue to engage, in bombing and shooting, and that that would and that would trigger, blockades, bombings, all those forms of collective punishment, that we've seen. So, I mean, I'm not saying it would make absolutely no difference, but I don't think it would make as fundamental a difference as a lot of people think it would. But I want to move on to a lighter subject before we start taking questions, and update people about what we were talking about on God, it was Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday night. So if people remember from Wednesday, Quillette ran a review of my book, Canceling Comedians While the World Burns, and it was the review. Like, Quillette tweeted out the review, and the Quillette tweet was quote tweeted by a friend of the show, Jordan Peterson, who said, based on,
not a lot of people know this, but the B in Jordan B. Peterson actually stands for Burgess, because he's he's such a good friend of the show.
Exactly. He actually changed it to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he and Peterson maybe read the review, or let's be honest, skimmed the review. I think it's as likely as not that he only read the tweet. I'm certain that he did not read the book, because the book is full of very critical comments about him.
Well, he picked up your book and then he read the Communist Manifesto again, and he figured it was close enough.
Yeah, exactly. So as after he tweeted this thing out, where he said, he at least got the title of the book, looked at the tweet, maybe he skimmed the review, and he said it's poured for the best of the left, to beat the worst of the left. And so I responded to that by quote tweeting it, and with the screenshots of all the stuff I say about him in the book, and said, I appreciate the compliment, that I'm the best of the left, but just FYI, here's all the stuff I say about you in the book. Since you think I'm the best of the left, I don't understand why you wouldn't want to have a discussion with me about any of these topics. And oddly enough, let's see. So our graphic designer, J. Andrew World, made a little graphic of this. We'll keep this updated with the number of days. This is the lobster clock, showing how long it's been since this invitation to do a debate on the thing, the various criticisms that I've made of him in the book, in a book that about him that I co-wrote with Matt McManus and Marion Trejo and Conrad Hamilton, Myth and Mayhem, a leftist critique of Jordan Peterson, and that I've made in many other places. So clearly we have a lot to talk about, and since Peterson agrees that I'm the best of the left, I don't understand why he wouldn't have a discussion about these things. But somehow, looking at the lobster clock, it's been 5 days since the invitation was made, and he hasn't responded. So I don't know. I mean, if you got nothing else to do on Twitter, you might want to ask him, like, what's up with that? Is he just like mulling it over? Is he thinking about it? It seems like something that should happen.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And I don't know why he wouldn't come on our show. We have it's I think it's one of the chillest shows. I mean, even Nando coming on, a couple months ago made the comment that, our show feels a lot more, has a more, hangout vibe than a lot of these leftist shows. Like we cover a lot of news stories and stuff, but, the interviews are kind of, they wind around, and I don't know why he wouldn't want to come and just kind of hang out. I mean, maybe it's too casual for him and he doesn't really, maybe Jordan Peterson isn't capable of just kind of hanging out. But I mean, we could always set it up as like a more formal debate if that's the case.
Yeah, look, if he doesn't want to come on the show for whatever reason, like you said, it's a very relaxed environment. I think, I think that I think that he would have fun.
Is he capable? Is he capable of having fun?
Well, if he is, he would have fun, and if nothing else, he could learn some stuff about the history of postmodernism and Marxism and why those are different things, and we could have some enlightening discussions about whether it makes sense to say that the fact that even lobsters have hierarchy means that we can't try to achieve a more economically egalitarian society. And we could keep it loose. We could get into other topics, enforce monogamy, whether it makes sense to say that Marxism is permanently discredited by the fact that Stalinist regimes in the 20th century, called themselves Marxists, but somehow the philosophers that he likes, like Nietzsche and Martin Heidegger, aren't discredited by other 20th century regimes that liked them. Or in Heidegger's case, he was literally a member of the ruling party. So I think it could, I think that it could be a very interesting discussion. But look, if he doesn't want to have the relaxed, informal discussion on the show, I am totally happy. I'm in Michigan right now anyway. I'd be totally happy to if he wants to do like a formal thing with opening statements and rebuttals, we could. I'm totally happy to drive to Toronto and do that. I know that the border's still closed, but it'd take a little while to set this up anyway. By like July, I'm sure it'll be open again. So I'm totally open to that option too. David Slavic, Canadian actual friend of the show, has kindly offered to moderate it. So I'm good with either option, but Dr. Peterson just needs to let us know how he wants to do this.
He's got one of the most impressive Soviet art collections, I think, of anybody. And I mean, the reason that he claims he has it is pretty disturbed. He says that he likes to remember how people struggle through the gulags, and he likes to keep that with him as he does his writing. But I think that it would be interesting to get a tour through Jordan Peterson's Soviet art collection and see what he knows about the art he's chosen to decorate his apartment with. I personally would also be taking a lot of benzos if I constantly sat around with pictures of Stalin in my house and sat in a constant state of terror from that. But you know what? To each his own.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I kind of think he just likes Soviet art, like that. Like, oh, I need to have it because Soviet art just reminds me of. I don't know. I'm sure he could have I'm sure there are pictures of gulags or something if like he really wanted to be reminded of it. But who knows? Maybe that's an unfair speculation. But
well, he told the New York Times that the Gulag statement where he was like, I like to keep it around me to remember the struggles of the Gulags. Like he has a whole spiel that he gives to people that he invites to his house, which doesn't maybe make him the best person to throw light get-togethers, but
if every random visitor starts hearing about gulags,
yeah,
yeah,
and everybody kind of has to they're starting to get a little drunk and they have to look at the big Stalin picture across the wall and have Jordan Peterson give them a long-winded not so researched explanation of each picture and why he chose that picture. And it's just I don't know. Personally, I don't think that that's really entertainment quality decoration, I guess. But maybe he just doesn't have a lot of people over.
Yeah, see, so he could use more casual hanging out in his life, so he should come on the show. I will also I do also think it's interesting because I think the exact same rhetorical strategy that Peterson uses to defend capitalism and gender hierarchy and all that stuff. You could say, look, you've got this hierarchy of prison guards, prisoners, and state officials, send people to prison, and we might not like it. We might think it's unfair, but really, hierarchy, is innate in our genes. Even lobsters have hierarchy. So who are we to try to mess with these things and dismantle them?
This show has a hierarchy. I'm at the bottom of it, but I think Jordan Peterson would have a fun time on the show,
Well, there we go. Okay. Well, yeah, I don't know. We'd have to figure that out at some point. All the people who work for the show, where they are in the PTA, hierarchy, can maybe have a little org chart, that portrays people as progressively bigger lobsters as they climb up the ladder.
Yeah. But by the way, speaking of your book and the reviews of it, and I don't know, I've been kind of doing my pandemic sobriety thing, and now I'm on vacation, so I got this Garrison Brothers. I didn't drink it all. It's in this mug right here, but I got this Garrison Brothers bourbon. I went there, and kind of the only like smaller bottle of bourbon that they had from Texas was that. So, I wanted to give you the proper cheers.
Oh, nice. Well, here, let's Larceny bourbon small batch. So, all right. Yeah. Thanks, man. This is going to be like if you remember that episode of The Simpsons where Homer goes into space, and it was going to be Barney. Like Barney beat him in the astronaut training, but then Barney has what he thinks is a glass of champagne, and he goes off the wagon, starts acting so crazy that he gets kicked out, and then Homer comes, for his first drink.
It is my first drink in over a year, actually. I don't know, just I kind of have a just the depression, I guess, of the pandemic. I felt like maybe continuing to drink wasn't the best idea for me, because I haven't really left the house much, and throughout that whole thing. But now I'm vaccinated. I'm in Austin, and it's been kind of a shit show of a couple of days. I ended up having to. I thought I was gonna be staying with people. I ended up getting an Airbnb, so I'm recording out of an Airbnb right now, and yeah, but it's been an interesting couple of days. I ran around on one of those electric scooters today, because throughout Austin they have them on the curb everywhere. So you go into this app, and you put the barcode in, and then you can just kind of ride an electric scooter everywhere, and that was pretty fun.
Yeah, last night actually. So I'm visiting my little brother in Los Angeles right now, and somebody else that we were hanging out with last night had. Saw we passed by some of those on the street, and he did that, and so we were all just sort of walking back, and he was zooming around back and forth on it. Which in the middle of nowhere, Michigan, where I've been living during the pandemic, obviously they don't have that. But in any case, let's get some questions to. Griscom is not coming on tonight.
I'm actually going to. I think I'm going to lunch with him tomorrow. We're supposed to get barbecue. I mean, I don't know. He doesn't have a car right now, and I don't have a car right now. So, or his car isn't.
Activity.
So I don't know. I guess we'll see how how the two of us end up linking up. But so there was one question. I'm trying to find it. I don't have my mouse in my. It's weird not having my mouse in my second screen to go through all this stuff. But there was a question about whether Eisenhower would be considered a social democrat by today's standards, and I thought that would be a good question to start with.
Yeah, right. That's interesting. I mean, I think basically no, but also a little bit, yeah. So because I think the basic thing is that it seems like the ruling class goes through these big shifts where I always think about that Lenin quote about how revolutions happen, when the rulers can't rule in the old way, and people won't be ruled in the old way, and all that stuff. And even though, of course, none of these things we're about to talk about are revolutions, I think that there is a little bit of that there are these big sort of fundamental policy shifts that happen, and then all of the fighting between Democrats and Republicans, sort of happens within those broad parameters of whatever the big shifts are. So after after the Reagan Revolution, you had Clinton and Obama, who were basically there were real differences between what they did and what Republican presidents did and everything, but basically they basically.
Did I disappear for a minute, or did we both disappear for a minute?
For 2 seconds.
Okay.
but like basically Clinton and Obama governed like Reaganites, and all of the sort of differences between them and Republicans were happening within that broad framework. And similarly, I think that like before that, right, when FDR did his big shift, the New Deal, even though like Republicans like Eisenhower like definitely were back. I mean, even Truman, right, as a Democrat, as somebody who had been FDR's vice president, although he was also very intentionally picked as a much more conservative vice president than Henry Wallace who'd come before him. But like even Truman, as like a conservative Democrat, had like backed off from a lot of the New Deal, like a lot of the sort of best aspirations of the New Deal project, and certainly Eisenhower like definitely did. But like broadly speaking, yeah, sure. I mean, like he was doing like what, like if you like in Tori Reid's book Toward Freedom, that we're talking about a couple weeks ago, talks about like the public good framework, as opposed to like that sort of later neoliberal one that like, yeah, broadly speaking, Eisenhower was operating within that. And he was like, not that I think the New Deal quite rose to the level of social democracy anyway, but like I think that he was that sort of, whatever you want to call it, like half social democratic framework that was established with the New Deal. Eisenhower was like broadly operating within those parameters. So was Nixon, for that matter, right? Like,
I mean, Eisenhower, though, consolidated, the New Deal gains. I think more than anything, you know what I mean? Like, kind of some of these bigger gains that kind of FDR tried out that were like trials under him were kind of managed by Eisenhower in terms of like, Eisenhower like shrunk down departments. He like pushed some departments into other departments. Like it still was a very conservative, I think, turn for the New Deal. But yeah.
But he wasn't breaking from the basic framework in the way that like Reagan, and even before Reagan, Carter, was starting to break from like the basic, New Deal framework. And I mean, of course, obviously, like, Eisenhower was also, well, I mean, even Truman, right, was starting the Cold War and starting like the loyalty oaths and, persecution of communists and fellow travelers. And he had, and obviously like Eisenhower is like when like some of the worst like foreign policy atrocities happened, like the United Fruit Company, coups in Latin America. But whatever, I mean, like
Eisenhower absolutely loved the CIA. And recently I've been, and it's been kind of touch and go because originally I was doing it with Vic, and then he kind of had to bail on it to go help out with like the TMBS list of histories again. But with Vic and Kale, we've been working on like a Jakarta method documentary that we've been slowly putting together over time. And I remember really doing some like research into like watching documentaries on Eisenhower and the CIA and stuff. And Eisenhower, like Truman was kind of the CIA kind of coup ideas were put in front of him, and he kind of rejected some of like the wilder ones. And Eisenhower seemed to absolutely love like the covert nature of the CIA itself. And then of course JFK kind of didn't really reject that, but kind of felt uncomfortable with it in the way that Eisenhower definitely didn't.
Right. And then of course, right. And then of course, like with Nixon, he was all about that. Like I actually just finished as part of research for another book that I'm writing. I just finished reading this, The Trial of Henry Kissinger by Christopher Hitchens. First time in a long time. And yeah, he goes into like some of the details there, which are insane. Like when Kissinger was like in the Nixon and Ford administrations, he was like Secretary of State and National Security Advisor and chairman of something called the 40 Committee that like ran like the sort of dirty work, CIA operations and stuff. And that was Yeah, I mean that was nuts. Like there was a point where like before like the actual coup that removed Allende in Chile, uh, the Kissinger and Nixon wanted to do a coup to like actually like just preemptively like to stop Allende from even taking the oath of office, even assuming power in the first place. And but as part of that, they determined that there was like one particular Chilean general who wasn't even a socialist, but who was like too much of a constitutionalist to be okay with a military coup. And so like there are all kinds of documents where Kissinger is talking to, is communicating with people in elsewhere in the Nixon administration about well, they said kidnap him, but it didn't really seem like they had a plan for what to do with him after they kidnapped him.
Yeah,
So,
they ended up killing him, right?
yeah, they ended up killing him, and like it was pretty clear that was always the plan.
Yeah.
Was to.
But like they posed as one of those like whatever happened there situations. If I remember, because I remember they touched on that, or Vincent Bevins touches on that in the Jakarta method too. Kind of just there's like a struggle, and it's like, well, whatever happened there, like he was either kidnapped and they were gonna kill him, or like in the process of kidnapping him, Yeah, I don't know. It's absolutely insane, looking back at some of that stuff. And really, we consider like the CIA this like, I mean, it's covert as hell, like it always has been. But a lot of the stuff that we consider like CIA plots are just kind of like throwing darts at a dartboard and hoping one of them lands. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like thinking about how history could have changed if another plot, let's say, that kind of got foiled at the last minute or didn't go through. I mean, you can look at those with Castro and like how many fucking plots they had to kill Castro that never quite they never made it to anything. But like any of those plots actually being pushed through to the end would have totally changed the course really of history. And
and I think if you think about how the CIA works, that's kind of inevitable that it's going to be that like there is going to be this like element of like throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks, because which Hitchens was talking about in the Chile chapter of the Kissinger book, that there were like multiple groups of Chilean military people they were in contact with, and one of them seems to have sort of gone off on its own, although they didn't really discourage them and whatever. But like if you think about how that would work, because like you're like the kind of elements of society that you're going to have to work with to do like what the CIA has done in these countries. Like, there's going to be some like group of like crazy fascist ex-military people who are willing to meet with you and talk about this. And maybe there's going to be elements of like local organized crime who are going to do that. And you can't actually trust any of these people, to have their act together, to even know what the other ones are doing, So it's like, if you want these coups and destabilizations to happen, I mean, you're going to end up just like putting out as many feelers as possible and like seeing what you can get going, from like a few different directions.
Yeah, and if you even here, if groups of right wing like ex-military, just kind of random fucking people like that might be in a position to do something. Like if you like, I can imagine people that I've known, either in like bars or whatever, and like the amount of damage someone could really do if they were given like government backing to just be like, go out, try this, see if it works. You know what I mean? Like try to overthrow the government, see if it works. And it's like, Jesus fucking Christ, like the amount of destabilization that we could have in the world if like even a majority of these plots had gone through at different places at different times, like it's really not something thought out. Like, and you'd think that at some point we'd kind of learn a lesson and be like, like maybe we should think out some of these plots before we really do them. But like in the moment, I mean, especially with Nixon and Kissinger, but like, even today, like, I mean, with the, rebel groups that are empowered in one place to like, like fight against another group, and then we give those rebels weapons, and then like those rebels turn on us, and then they're fighting in another group, and those weapons have just kind of been funneled to like, like it's just look at like Syria, or just look at like Yemen, like any of these places that kind of we've just empowered proxies to do our work for us, like, and the amount of damage that can really be done is like, because you can't like in those situations you can't really like like this, like you can't really see what someone's real intentions are. Like even if you're saying that like, oh well, the U.S. has like pure intentions, which obviously we fucking don't, but like you can't really, there's no mechanism to really see where those weapons are going to go, or like who people are really working for, like what their true motivations are. So we're just kind of empowering like whatever group.
Right, because like you said, you think about the American equivalents, like some like crazy right-wing ex-military person you might meet at a bar or something. It's like, yeah, if you gave that person weapons and you talked about some plot, A, they probably wouldn't go through with it because it's probably all bluster, and B, if they actually did go through with it, God knows what they would actually do, right? Like because they're crazy and dangerous and unpredictable.
Glad to see my garden plot's doing okay.
That's good. So John asks, where would Henry Wallace be politically in today's world? That's actually a really interesting question because, like, the two things we've just been talking about are the ways that, like, even if like Truman and Eisenhower like scaled back like the ambitions of the New Deal project, which they definitely did, they were still basically operating in that framework. And then like LBJ actually expanded it in some really important ways with the Great Society. But like all of these people, right, we're also engaged in the kind of stuff internationally that we've been talking about, right? I mean, like there are like leftist governments, that LBJ like overthrew for doing things that were like milder reforms than the Great Society. Michael Albert points that out in that Paracon graphic novel. And, which really shows you that it's like any sort of halfway social democratic stuff they're willing to do in the United States, it wasn't ideological. It's like that was just the way that the ground had shifted. You just, felt like you had to do that stuff. Be too destabilizing, maybe if you didn't. Whereas Henry Wallace is actually a really interesting figure because he did have good foreign policy views. He didn't want to have a Cold War with the Soviet Union, and he was he was friendlier to third world interests certainly than than any like mainstream Democrat was at the time. And so in fact, like when Henry Wallace was so if you read like Robert Caro has this series has this like this multi-volume biography of LBJ, which Nando got me to start reading. The first volume, which is the only one I've read so far, is called The Road to Power. And in there, they talk about, was it Cactus Jack Garner, who was FDR's original vice president, who was like a pretty conservative Democrat, like actually very conservative, to the point where like he was willing to go along with the New Deal stuff at first because he thought, okay, this is an economic emergency, we have to do some of this. But then between the sit-down strikes in the late 30s and FDR floating that court packing plan, Garner like turned really hard against him, like calling FDR a dictator, that kind of hard. And in fact, tried to challenge him at one point for, I think, the 1940 Democratic nomination. And then, it was getting clear that World War II was about to start, and that kind of fizzled out. But then FDR replaced him for that next term with, for the third term with Henry Wallace. But Wallace was only vice president for one term, and he was replaced with Truman because the party bosses thought that Wallace was way, way too left-wing. And then in 1948, Wallace ran for president on the Progressive Party ticket, and he was the only candidate. Like that was like a four-way election because you had Wallace as the Progressive Party candidate, Dewey, of course, is the Republican, Truman is the Democrat, and then Strom Thurmond is the Dixiecrat candidate. And out of the four of them, right, and I think also any previous major presidential candidates, Wallace was the only one who refused to speak to segregated crowds. And like the Progressive Party was also like to a very great extent, right? I mean, it was like the sort of foot soldiers of that were like the CPUSA, he was like very allied with them. So, which is not to say that he was a communist himself, but I mean, he was certainly like a very principled left liberal who was left enough that he was willing to see the CPUSA as allies, and certainly didn't want to have a Cold War. So, I mean, where would he be politically in today's world? I don't know. I mean, like, I'm pretty sure he would have supported Bernie.
Yeah. It's interesting, I think, that, FDR's moves in the New Deal seemed like it was, I mean, some kind of, at least, political capture of socialist and communist energies at the time. Like, like giving workers enough power that maybe the Democratic Party could capture that energy, and instead of having them, fully go, you know what, like, this is a depression, we're fucked, like, it's time for us to try a new system. So, like, I don't know, but it also isn't like it's not like they're empowering workers to really take control of their lives.
For sure. For sure they weren't doing that. Like, and look, I mean, the New Deal, like, was, there's this stuff in there that's means tested. There was stuff in there that, I mean, this was all taking place within what was very much an apartheid state, right? America in, the 1930s. And so there's some of it that reflected that, that was segregated. There's, like, it was.
There's the story that Harvey Kay tells that I really love, and Torrey Reed, I think, started to tell it Towards Freedom, but I don't think he didn't tell it as much as, or he didn't tell it in the way that Harvey Kay's told it, or that I've heard Harvey Kay tell it. It's the story of A. Philip Randolph going to FDR during World War II, and he's kind of pushed by Eleanor Roosevelt to go and say that they were going to have that march on Washington in 1941, and that that they were going to bring like 100,000 people to march on Washington at the time, and FDR kind of freaked out and realized like how bad that could get for I mean, how the state would kind of crack down on it. I mean, without even having him, and like the police would crack down on it. So he pushed it so that they kind of desegregated the military or parts of it.
Right. And I mean,
he wasn't willing to go farther than that. And
he certainly wasn't. And of course he also signed off on, Japanese American, internment and, beginning the Manhattan Project, although obviously that was, ended and actually used by Truman. And I think in general, right? I mean, like, FDR didn't run as a New Deal Democrat in 1932. He ran as he ran as like a pretty conservative Democrat. Like, if anything, it was like Herbert Hoover was spending too much money. And I remember talking about this with Sean Richman, not when he was on this show, but the lost Sean Richman interview for Dead Pundit Society, that's never been released. I'm gonna have to see if I can dig that up someday. But we were talking about that. Maybe I'll release it on our Patreon or something. But we were talking about that there. That's like, look, neither of us would have voted for FDR in 1932. Like we would have voted for Norman Thomas, right? Which is, but because there was such a severe emergency going on, and he knew that nobody within like normal establishment politics was going to give him any ideas for what to do about it that were actually going to like calm down the situation and have like get the capitalist economy out of the emergency, who's willing to go to the Brain Trust or all these people who've gone to like Missouri Teachers College or whatever and had more left-wing economic views. And we got this thing that was in many ways, we just talked about, a miserable compromise, but it was still like a massive like package of reforms, compared to what had existed earlier. And I mean, there's a kind of I don't know. It's like, so of course there is, right? I mean, like the ultra left narrative, or even like Norman Thomas said this, right? Like somebody told him famously, it's like, oh, FDR is carrying out a lot of your platform. He's like, yeah, he carried it out on a stretcher. And I get what he's saying there. And like, there is, I think sometimes there's an exaggerated ultra left version of it where people make it sound like, there would have been a communist revolution in the United States if not for the New Deal. I don't actually think that's true, but I do. I think there's a germ of truth to it, right? Like when FDR first came to power, if you look at like the banking crisis that was going on, and the number of like places where like farmers, were infuriated to the point where they were like literally like marching on like the banks with pitchforks and stuff. Like, I don't think we would have had a revolution or socialism or anything like that, but I think we would have had a lot more social instability and violence and
Well, I mean, it's really about energy, right? Like, I mean, where is the energy going to go? I mean, if you're in a desperate situation like that in the middle of a depression, like, I don't think that there's really like obviously we're not going to have maybe a communist revolution, but it was, pre-Cold War, and people are going like, yeah, I don't know, like you can see the energy behind different socialist movements kind of taking form. And somebody like FDR, who's smart enough to realize that, you're in this desperate situation, would want to clamp down on it before it gets to the point where they lose control over it. So I think that saying, specifically like, well, we could have had a communist revolution. Like, yeah, you could have had a lot of things. You know what I mean? Like you could have had a fascist fucking revolution when things get so desperate.
Which is probably more likely, honestly, given the way America was at the time. But yeah, right. Like, sure. The point is, whatever form it took, even if it was just that, like, there was like a much crazier version of the Depression where, like, banks going out of business all over the place and like a lot more social breakdown and violence happen, even if it didn't turn into anything as dramatic. I don't know. I don't know. So yeah, Mitchell asked question, why did my wife leave me? Kenzo, I think, has been doing some streams that would be more relevant to this topic. He said I should I should come on sometime to do that. They're going to do a thing where, like, people who leftists who are like married and have their shit together will like give advice to to like single young men. Said we can't tell them to be lobsters, but we can give them some advice. So maybe you'll see me talk about that on Kenzo's thing.
I thought it was really funny at the beginning of the pandemic. Stav was doing an advice show.
Yes, I remember that. That was awesome. Yeah, gotta get him on here.
Yeah, I really hope he does come on here. I've tweeted at him and he said he would, and then he kind of disappeared from it, but he still follows me. I still remember though, like last summer, a couple weeks before Michael passed, he had Stav on.
Yep.
And he had people send in a bunch of advice questions, and he was trying to get Stav to answer all of them.
Right.
I remember I texted Michael and I was like, you guys need to do more of this. Like, you guys need to keep this kind of thing going because this was hilarious.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that was always my that's I remember for a while last year that was my default thing for people who never watched TMBS. It was like to give them a sense of what it was like. Said recent guests have included Cornel West and Stavi from Cumtown.
It's just, I mean, it's funny when Stav gives the advice himself, but like having Michael kind of like read it to him, like knowing he was going to start some shit, like, and knowing that the answer could go anywhere, like having Michael just be like laughing about it, like reading him the question, and then Stav like answering the question, and like seeing, everybody like, laughing really hard behind it was really just made it like, I don't know. It just made it really funny to me.
Yeah, fair enough. Yep. All right. So we can take maybe one more question, and then we should probably call it a day. I should say, while I am thinking of actual non-ironic friends of the show, I am going to be on This Is Revolution tomorrow night at 9 Eastern, talking about the new book with Jason and Pascal. So check that out.
It'd be funny if they had gotten you and Norman Finkelstein to come back and talk about cancel culture together. And I hope that one day we have him on. I mean, I don't really know how you get in contact with him, but I feel like he would be a really excellent guest. Although he can talk for like 3 hours and without stopping, and it's like, geez.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe let's see if we could do a lightning round of like a couple of these. Thoughts on the ontological argument for God's existence. if you don't know what the question's about, this is not going to, we don't have time to go into it, but basically Kant was right. Existence isn't a property. We can't compare non-existent objects to existing objects because non-existent object is just kind of an incoherent idea. I think Alvin Plantinga said it best. If there's one thing we're sure there aren't any of, it's non-existent objects. Let's see. You spend one day hanging with Carnap. What do you guys do together? I don't know. I mean, Carnap is an interesting philosopher and also a socialist, so I'm sure there'd be tons to talk about. I don't know. I guess I might ask him what he thought about the young Quine. So that'd be interesting. Let's see. When I was 15, I was a global warming denier and asked my geography teacher about how should they handle that kind of thing. He told me I was talking shit, which just pushed me in harder. Yeah, absolutely. I think you need to be like really like that kind of situation, 15-year-old, whatever. I think you need to be like super earnest and patient about it, and just sort of like calmly explain like how the evidence works and and all that stuff. I think if you try to pull the you don't know what you're talking about or anything like that, I don't think any of that's going to be helpful.
Yeah. I remember, when I was younger, my dad is a green architect, which at this point in my life, I have, a lot of disagreements about his kind of more, I'm not going to say corporate, but like his solutions to how you handle climate change are a lot different than I think mine would be. Like, his is on a very individual basis because he's kind of he's building houses for people that are like sustainable houses for, like most like poorer people aren't going to be able to afford those houses. You know what I mean? So that's not like a solution to climate change. But I am always grateful that he, he took me to go see, Al Gore's movie, like Inconvenient Truth, when it came out, which I think also I have disagreements with kind of
sure.
the way that Al Gore's rolled that out. But I don't know. I think that.
All right, Forrest, this is around. We gotta.
All right. We'll go over this another time with.
All right, fair enough. Let's see. Yes, we should have sustainable housing for everyone. Absolutely.
Agreed. But right now that's not how it works.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we need government policy.
Right now we don't even have regular housing for everyone.
Yeah, very true. Which is actually absolutely something the left should spend more time talking about.
And I'm not criticizing green art. I mean, I think that it's really great. It's just that the affordability of it, leaves a lot to be desired. It's upper class and upper middle class people that end up being able to afford green architecture.
Right. So, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, we should have massive investment in public housing, and sure, it should be green. But right, I get what you're saying. All right. Should philosophers bother having debates about stuff like what sort of rights dolphins should have, or is that kind of thing a distraction? Yeah, look, I think that I'm all in favor of, obviously that kind of thing is not immediately politically relevant or politically relevant at all, maybe. I don't know. And so I think those of us who are trying to do political work, to the extent that we're trying to do that, it's a distraction from that. But I don't think philosophy has to earn its keep by being politically relevant. I think that one of the reasons that I want a different kind of society is that I want everybody to have less financial stress and more free time so they can do other valuable human activities that aren't necessarily immediately instrumentally valuable, like creating art or like thinking about interesting philosophical questions. So whatever.
It also brings people in. The same way that pop science brings people into learning more about science, pop philosophy kind of brings people into being more interested in philosophy.
Yeah. Fair enough. Let's see. Do you believe in objective morality? Sorta. I don't know that there's any way to lightning round that one, but I think that there are. This is the least satisfying possible answer, but I think it depends what you mean. I promise I'll go into way more depth about that at some other time in the future. That's not going to be the final answer forever. But let's see. Thoughts about your recent shout out by the Lobster King. What would you expect to debate about if you went forward with it? Well, for thoughts about it, watch the beginning of the stream. where we talked about it right after the Biden-Israel stuff, or watch the clip, which came out on Sunday, so yesterday. We did a clip yesterday about it, where we went into to detail about this. But my main thought is it's been 5 days. In his original tweet, he said the clock is ticking. Well, so is this one. Let's get on it, right? What would that debate be like? I think it would be. I think it'd be fun to watch. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
I think that someone should get the two of you absolutely hammered and then set you guys on each other in the debate. I feel like.
Yeah, I have actually gone back and forth about. She's talking about Aaron Rabinowitz from the Embrace the Void podcast. I have actually gone back and forth with Aaron a little bit about this in various forums in the past, but I would also say that I think that I think that we can reason about morality, whether what we're reasoning about is exactly an issue of objective fact or whether you should think of it in a slightly different way, I think is ultimately in the do dolphins have rights category. Interesting, maybe valuable in like human terms to think about, but I don't think it's going to be immediately politically relevant.
I have trouble sometimes with people, when it comes to morality itself, like making statements about like shades of gray, because I always think of Obama's, when Obama's like, well, look, all right, there's a lot of shades of gray, and I'm like, yeah, but like, so at what point does it become like an argument that like it's all right to drone strike people on these specific? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's right that there's shades of gray. He's just wrong about where they're located.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put it that way. But we are at an hour. I really do need to get going. Going to go hang out with my little brother for just a little bit longer, and then go see some of my favorite people in Los Angeles, like Bessner and Megan Day and Anna Kasparian, before I go back to the airport tonight. So
you're going back tonight? Damn.
Late tonight. My flight's late.
Yeah.
So
I'm in Austin until Thursday, so I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing for that amount of time.
Fair enough. You're gonna be able to be on the computer for Total Recall on Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, I should know for sure tomorrow. I'm going to a different Airbnb, but yeah, I mean that is the plan. I don't really have much planned while I'm here. Kind of a lot of them fell through. So,
all right, sounds good. All right, guys. So we'll see you on Wednesday for Movie Stream. We're talking about Total Recall. Should be a lot of fun. I will see you then. Left is best.